Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and this week we have both, an interesting person and a topical issue.
Absolutely. A partner of mine, Aimee Majoue from our firm, is going to be with us, but she's not going to be talking about practice of law at our firm. She's going to be talking about homelessness in Oklahoma City and perhaps even beyond the boundaries of Oklahoma City, because it is something that we have wondered about doing another show on for some time. We did one a number of years ago, which was quite good with Will Hoke, but we wanted kind of an update on what is the current situation among the homeless in Oklahoma City and surrounding area.
And it's all coming up today on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other when we're not going anywhere.
Soccer has been such an important part of my life. It's been my life for 18 years. It is an amazing experience to be a part of the Big 12 championship team in 2017 with the OSU Cowgirls. And looking back, it's one of the best things that has happened to me. I'm Lana Duke, I'm a medical student, and I'm Chickasaw. There is a need for physicians in rural and underserved areas of Oklahoma, and that's where my heart is. I definitely want to stay here and practice in Oklahoma and give back to the community that has given me so much. And I want to make my family proud and Chickasaws proud too, and ultimately make other people have healthier, happier lives is what I really set out to do.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
As we talked about in the open, our guest today is Aimee Majoue. She is a partner of mine at Crowe Dunlevy, and she is a very active advocate for the homeless in Oklahoma City and the surrounding area. Aimee did her undergraduate work at St. Mary's College of California. She did her law work at Oklahoma City University, where she graduated summa cum laude. In her service at Oklahoma City University, was named the outstanding law student in the state of Oklahoma. That includes both Oklahoma City, OU, and Tulsa, so that's quite a distinction. In 2018, she joined our firm in the private practice of law. She has been active as a board member of the City Rescue Mission. She's a founding member of the Oklahoma City Homeless Task Force. She's got a number of other activities we're going to talk about with her when we get this introduction finished, so let's get right to it. This is her first visit. Aimee, really glad to have you.
So happy to be with you guys today. Thank you.
Aimee, from looking at your resume, it's easy to see your passions. The law, homeless issues. What's drawn you to these specific areas?
Well, my journey here is a long and interesting one that I just like to say has been divinely inspired along the way. I graduated undergrad with a degree in theology in California, and then realized I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that degree. Your options are really to work for a church or teach, and neither of those were what I saw a passion in. So I decided I was going to go to someplace new that I had never been before, just live there for a year and then maybe move back home and pursue a master's degree in something. And I closed my eyes and pointed at a map, and it landed on Oklahoma. And I thought, it's just 1 year. I'll go see what it's like to live in Oklahoma. And I packed up everything, moved out here, worked as a waitress for a while, and ended up really loving it here and wanting to stay in Oklahoma. So I did get a job working for a church as a youth director. And all throughout my life, I really had a passion for poverty issues. I saw as a child people on the street, and I never understood in our society, in our world, how anyone would have to go without food, without shelter. It just didn't sit right with me. And as I studied my theology degree, a lot of my life goals and purpose is really inspired by my faith and this idea that we have a responsibility for one another, and that we're not meant to judge, and that those of us who have are meant to go give to those who have not. So when I was a youth director, I would take my youth group kids out to volunteer every once in a while. We started volunteering with Hot Dogs for the Homeless, which I've gotten very involved in, and I'll tell you more about in a little bit. And from there, I got a job teaching theology at Bishop McGinnis, and I taught there for 5 years and taught the social justice course to high school seniors. But I still felt like I wasn't supposed to work for a church or teach, which were both of the things I did. And I started really praying for where I was supposed to be led. And long story short, I was guided into attending law school, and my passion remained poverty issues. And so my goal really was to do legal advocacy work for the homeless.
The metro area has a homeless population of approximately what size, Aimee?
The metro area has about 1,500 homeless individuals, and I know that this show goes across Oklahoma, so Oklahoma City is about 1,500 individuals. Tulsa is about 1,000. Our state altogether, according to HUD estimates, has about 4,000 homeless, and we have a lot of Native, indigenous people who are homeless and receiving services in rural areas, as well as all of the individuals who are in downtown. So when you look at the social services provided throughout our state, the hub of them are really in Oklahoma City and Tulsa metro areas, because that's where the largest number is. Particularly in Oklahoma City, the Homeless Alliance is an incredible organization that was created several years ago to really increase collaboration among all of the social services. So one of the issues probably in every state, not just Oklahoma, is that we may have social services for this population, but funding is low and no one really knows what anyone else is doing. So the Homeless Alliance really brought together every organization in Oklahoma City area that serves the homeless, so we could pool resources, know what everyone was doing, and really communicate about all of the clients and better serve the needs. And I know that there are similar social service collaboration programs in Tulsa as well.
Aimee, one of the things I've learned about helping the homeless is that there isn't one answer that's universally applied to every person that's in that situation. In fact, there's almost as many solutions necessary as there are people involved. And yet, when you talk to a general part of the public, there's this belief that we need to do this or that, and the actuality is we need to do a lot of things. But people almost need an individual path out. So, as a person who studied this for countless hours and stayed up nights thinking about this, how do we come up with enough programming to try and help people improve their lives?
That's an incredibly insightful question, because we all when we have passions and we see that there's some sort of injustice going on, we think, what can I do to help? And that's sort of the position that I was in prior to going to law school, is how can I be part of the solution of poverty beyond just being, saying the beauty queen slogan of world peace. And when you really start to look at a problem, like you said, there are so many different solutions required or sub-solutions required to really end homelessness, solve poverty. And it becomes overwhelming. You also hit on a point that solving homelessness is very individualized. What needs to be done is going to be different for every unique individual, because the circumstances that have brought them to homelessness are going to be different. Therefore, they're going to require different services to get out of homelessness. So really figuring out where to focus is, for me at least, has been part of really listening to what my skill set is and researching what the actual needs in the area are. So I don't think that it's an issue of not having enough programming in Oklahoma City specifically. I think the issue is a lack of funding and a lack of awareness. Our homeless population is not as linked in as the rest of our population, as they don't have the same access, quick access to news, technology, information, resources. So getting them the information about what services they may even be eligible for is an initial barrier that requires personal conversation and communication with these individuals. And then having someone that's willing to take the time to listen to their unique story, and then is knowledgeable about the services that are available and can get that person into those services. So in my instance of trying to be part of the solution, I realized that so many incredible nonprofits already exist. So I wanted to find a way to be part of an already existing nonprofit, help them with funding, and help them now with my legal knowledge that I have, in addition to providing legal assistance to those who usually can't afford it in our communities, particularly our homeless population. And that's how I was led and drawn to being on the board of the City Rescue Mission, who helps hundreds of people a year overcome joblessness, addiction, you name it, whether it's an emergency homeless situation or a long-term homeless situation. City Rescue Mission and many other shelters in the area provide that long-term service. And so I'm proud to be part of that organization and sort of be part of a collaborative solution. I can't do it myself. Each individual can't do it themselves. We really have to work together as a community.
Aimee Majoue is our guest. Kent and I'll be back with more from Aimee after this break.
The Vet Hero office at the University of Central Oklahoma, it is a one-stop shop for veterans when they're trying to get their education.
I call it my encore job. I get to take care of veterans. We help them transition. I was that guy that transitioned after 24 years, and in the end, GI Bill is a benefit that those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine earned. It was the thing that made us the greatest country in the world coming out of World War II, and it will continue to do the same thing for this future generation of service members.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank #2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
back to The Verdict. Mick, Cornett, Kent Meyers. Our guest is Aimee Majoue, and we've centered this show around homelessness and possible solutions, but certainly aspects of it that maybe people haven't thought of before.
Yes, I want to go back a little bit, Aimee, to something that you alluded to in the first segment, and that is the number of homeless in Oklahoma City. I've got 2 or 3 questions about that. One, I suppose someone is homeless and calls Oklahoma City home, and someone might be homeless and is just passing through, just transitory. Are the numbers that you gave in the first segment the resident homeless, or does it include also those that are just passing through that happen to be homeless?
It includes all of the above, but that's an excellent point. Oklahoma City serves as a huge hub for all people across the country traveling through. We connect north, south, east, and west. So in my experience of meeting several of our city's homeless population who we claim as Oklahoma City's homeless, they may not claim Oklahoma City as their home. They might be on their way from one coast to another and staying over here for a matter of days or staying here for a matter of months with the hope of moving on to another location. So that overall number of 1,500-ish in Oklahoma City is both people who are permanently here as well as those who are traveling through.
Well, let me follow up with that just a minute. Did we see in Oklahoma City a significant increase in homelessness because of COVID?
Not a significant increase. The Homeless Alliance does every year what is called a point-in-time count, and it's done through HUD, so that way they can track homeless numbers throughout the entire country. And 2019's number was somewhere around 1,200 homeless in Oklahoma City. And last year's number during COVID was about 1,500. So there was a small increase from year over year, but I wouldn't say that that was necessarily caused by COVID. However, there were a significant number of other issues caused by COVID, not only for every human, but particularly for the homeless population. I mentioned earlier that one of the barriers for the homeless is access to information. And that was so clear to me when I was still serving the homeless throughout COVID. When I would go out and provide food or talk to people in the first couple of months when everything was first shut down, very few people knew what was going on. I know that a ton of the shelters were handing out information about COVID and safety, but for those who don't access care at shelters, for instance, we have many tent communities throughout the city where people live, a dozen people or so in a few tents. They had no access to information. All they knew is that when they took their, weekly walk to the gas station or the grocery store to try to buy a few things, they weren't allowed in. When they tried to go to McDonald's, they weren't allowed in. And they didn't really understand why. So week to week, when I would go out and talk to people throughout the first several months of COVID, a lot of it was providing them informational updates about what was going on. In addition to access to information, they didn't have access to masks. So several organizations started going out and handing out masks so that way they could be safe. Hand sanitizer, same thing. A lot of the shelters, too, that were overnight shelters for their own safety had to put in protocols that they couldn't take new clients or residents for a certain amount of time. They restricted whether individuals could come and go throughout their location, also for necessary safety. So as much as the whole world was put on lockdown, the homeless community was not only put on lockdown wherever they were at that time, but they were also disconnected even further from society, from what I saw, because of the lack of information.
Aimee, because of your background in this area and also in the legal profession, I assume your work takes you into the rights of a homeless person or the public property rights of an individual who might feel like they're being infringed upon by a homeless person. Is that part of your area of expertise?
To a degree, yes. So I definitely have followed a lot of the panhandling laws that affect a lot of the homeless and the various appeals that our city has gone through with the municipal code regarding panhandling. But more on the other side, I helped start Oklahoma City's first homeless court. And so I represent all of the homeless clients on that court. And really, my knowledge about homeless individuals' rights comes from seeing the charges that they mostly get. Mm-hmm. So when I get a new homeless court client, I know it's probably going to be one of 10 different charges, all relating to trespassing on property, because they really don't have property rights. They don't really have rights to their belongings. The police have the ability to move the homeless population from one location to another with very little warning at all. Fortunately, our Oklahoma City police are incredibly understanding of the homeless situation and actually have their own outreach team that can go out and try to work with the homeless population so that way they're not stripped of what they do have if they need to move from one part of property to another part of property. Another major issue that we have is public drunkenness, which is just part of the what you would expect with the population. Those are the bulk of the charges that this population gets. And so those things rack up a lot. Warrants get sent out for their arrest. They end up spending time in jail and then owing fines on that, which they already can't pay, which is part of why they didn't go to court in the first place. And it's sort of just this vicious cycle. So if you are basically being charged for being homeless, it continues to dig you further down into that hole. And even though you're a human with dignity and basic human rights, you really don't have many rights to fight it. Fortunately, our city is aware of that. And through this homeless court program, the individuals are given the opportunity and the grace to be linked up with services to try to better their lives. And if they are making steps towards doing that, then their cases get ultimately dismissed and their fines and fees waived.
Before we run out of time completely, just because we've been taping a number of shows this morning and I'm getting hungry, I wanted to ask you about the Hot Dogs for Homeless plan that you are a volunteer coordinator.
That segue. Yeah, Hot Dogs for the Homeless is a nonprofit organization here in Oklahoma City that has been around for a little over 18 years. It was started by one man who had an experience where the only food around when he wanted to feed a homeless person was a hot dog. And it was while he was on vacation in Texas. When he came home, he decided, that's not a hard thing to do, to go out and feed a few people a hot dog every weekend. And he started putting together these lunches. One thing led to another. His neighbors found out. The newspaper did an article about him. He started getting checks in the mail and donations on his porch. And so he went from doing a dozen lunches a week to 200 lunches a week, and being provided a shopping center location, rent-free to operate out of. And so he's been running this for a little over 18 years. My involvement started, I mentioned earlier, I was the youth director of a church, and I would bring my youth group students out. My involvement started as a volunteer, about 12 years ago now.
That's fantastic. I had not heard of that program before. That is fantastic. And is that taking place here in Oklahoma?
Yes, it's Oklahoma City, and we go out every Sunday.
That's fantastic. Aimee, thanks so much for enlightening our audience on all the situations that you are looking at and are so passionately devoted to. We'll have to have you back on another show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aimee.
Kent and I'll be right back.
It used to be okay in hospitals. It used to be okay in movie theaters. It was okay in classrooms, restaurants, and airplanes. But thanks to a greater understanding of the dangers, that's not okay anymore. So now that we know secondhand smoke causes lifelong health problems, why is it still okay to smoke with children in the car? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's get serious about protecting kids. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids got to know they can trust you. And that's what we've tried to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
That's a fascinating story Aimee told about her own personal journey. Moving to Oklahoma City, she thought she'd be here for a year. Next thing she knows, she's in law school, and she's like the upstanding student. And then she gravitates toward an issue that she's very fond of.
Yeah, and all the while, she's a very productive, efficient lawyer doing non-pro bono things, but she's still very, very active.
Well, Oklahoma has benefited certainly from that move she made. We really appreciate Aimee being on the show today, and we have a website, theverdict.tv. See you next week.